Death. Defined as the end of life or death. Defined as the end of life of a person or organism. However, death is a little harder to do death is a little harder to define in gaming. Death of a game refers. Bro, I haven't used a script in so long that I can't even read a script anymore. Nah, I'm yapping. I don't care. Defining death in video games is a lot more challenging. I feel like it has to be objective, like to be like the true meaning of like a video game has died. It needs to be objective that it died, right? And in my last video, I talked about how I felt that Marvel Rivals was dying, and I'm not gonna lie, I definitely did not expect the reception that video got, because usually you can like tell how people are gonna feel about your video, right? I know when I post blatant rage bait, but that video was pretty, genuine in my opinion. But I put die in quotation marks because obviously Marvel Rivals isn't dying, or is it? But nah. So we're gonna get into that this video. Basically, we're gonna talk about how you should define death in video games, the different stages, and like we're gonna end it off is if Marvel Rivals is actually dying. So first thing addressed, what did I mean in my other video? Basically, I'm saying that Marvel Rivals has died on like an enjoyment level, you feel me? Because personally, I'm not enjoying the game anymore, right? And there's plenty of reasons that could happen. Maybe I can't keep up with the meta. Maybe the meta's gotten worse, But personally, right, that's a subjective feeling. But death in a video game, I feel like for it to be like actually dead and for it to actually have meaning, it needs to be pretty objective. So, like I said earlier, we're gonna talk about the different stages, and we're gonna talk about when a game is truly dead. So if you like this style of content, low-key, if it's like this and it's not like, it's more like based on Marvel Rivals instead of like about Marvel Rivals, I could make videos like this all day. So like, comment, subscribe if you want to see more than this. Anyways, let's get started. So ChatGPT defines video game death as players and or developers no longer supporting or engaging within the game in any meaningful way. But personally, that definition is pretty ass, right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to define video game death, and we're going to give its criteria, right? So let's start with criteria because I feel like that's a little more important. I would say the 3 things to like say if a game is dying or is dead or to look for is number 1, size, because a game with 3,000 players and a game with 300,000 players die in very different ways, right? The next is engagement outside the community. This also kind of ties in with size because it's kind of like they all fucking merge into one. But is this game getting talked about outside of the community, right? And then the last is obviously, so I'm not gonna lie, while thinking of this video at my internship, I definitely forgot the last criteria I was gonna say. I had one, but I forgot it. So leave in the comment section down below how you categorize a game dying, and the best one gets pinned, or maybe if you say it and I remember that's what I was gonna say, you'll get pinned. That could also be the free engagement bait for today, so appreciate y'all. Leave comments down below. Anyways, let's get to those 2 because obviously they're more important if I didn't remember it. So size, this is very important to see if a game is dying or not, and it's basically by its player count, right? And the reason why I say size is because a player count is going to tell a lot more about a large game rather than a small game, right? For an example, a game that has definitively died is Multiverses, right? This game came out and it went crazy. 150k players off like release day. People were watching streams. I'm people, by the way. People were playing this game. People were talking about it. Everybody thought this was the next crazy thing, right? And for a good month, it was, right? But the next month came and the game fell off. And people were quick to say that, oh my goodness, Multiverses has died. This game is blah, blah, blah. This game is this game is that. At this point, I wouldn't say it's died yet. Because although it had a sharp decline of 150k players to 22k, if it kept that 22k consistent, I wouldn't have said the game died. I would say that's a steady, consistent player base, right? It's just a simply smaller game. However, the players drastically declined again and again and again and again until it really had literally hundreds of players left only playing it. And then it closed down. And then it reopened. and the game had another 100k players. And then 2 months later, it was right back to thousands. And then 2 months later after that, it was right back to hundreds. You see what I'm saying? A consistent, steady decline in player base is tentative, but it's not like the end-all be-all. Because now we have a game like Marvel Rivals. Marvel Rivals has also been in a consistent decline. But to be fair, it had like a 600k launch, right? And no one's gonna go around and tell you that 150k players on average is a small player base, because it's simply not. Like, it's just literally not, right? So size matters depending on pause. What's it called? The size of the game matters, because if your game is as big as Marvel Rivals is, it's unrealistic that you're gonna keep 600k players. It's impressive that it went up players in season 1, and I would say that's because it was better in season 1. I'm just saying. I don't think it's crazy to say that Marvel Rivals isn't gonna grow in a decent amount of time. I'm not saying it'll never grow, but I'm saying for like it. I don't think it's crazy to say that for like at least the next like 3 seasons, it's not gonna grow, because it has a steady player base and it has a steady people that are invested into the game, right? Because for example, you can take me. You can say I'm a hater. You can say that I don't actually like the game. You can say blah 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 because I make all these videos on how the game's terrible. I'm still going to give season 2.5 a chance. I'm going to play it. I'm just going to be honest. Now, if I don't enjoy it, then I'm not going to give it another chance. Pretty simple. And I might continue to make loosely Marvel Rivals based videos. But the point is that size is more than just player count. It's players invested and the scale of the game, right? Y'all basically get the point by now. Let's get on to the next criteria, media coverage, or, you know, motion outside the community. So this is a little bit more tricky in my opinion, because if you have a lot of media coverage outside the community, that's a sign that the game is growing. But just because you have no media coverage outside the community doesn't mean your game is dying. You feel me? But media coverage definitely is important, because it's going to get players that are, you know, that don't know about the game into the game. So, like I said, for example, this is why I don't think Marvel Rivals is going to grow. People don't really care about this game outside the shooter category and the like popular character category. Like, oh, what if we had a DC game, blah 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 blah, right? The game is big enough and the game is steady enough to get compared in like shooter conversations, like Overwatch versus Fortnite versus COD versus PUBG versus Marvel Rivals, blah blah blah. But like realistically though, outside of that, this game isn't as big as it is in gaming, which is why a lot of people outside the community are going to look at a game like this and say it's dead. And that's also the reason why the people in the community are so adamant about it's not dead, because both points are low-key valid. The people that are saying this aren't dead, well, if you're playing the game, if you're involved, it's pretty clearly not dead. But if you're outside the community, you haven't heard anything about it, you see a lot of people complaining, it looks like it's dead to you, right? So that's why it's kind of tricky to say if Marvel Rivals is dead or not. Well, actually, it's really not. Marvel Rivals isn't dead. It's kind of tricky to say, is Marvel Rivals dying? Because yes, it has a declining player count, but people are still invested into the game. The people that are invested are still invested. And then, yes, media coverage. Nobody covers it unless you're in the community. But does that matter though? It's a question, and it's an interesting question, and you know, I was just thinking about this while reading the comments. Anyways, you know, low key, I could definitely make more videos like this. Holy stutter of absolute hell. I was gonna make this like kind of my last Marvel Rivals video, but if it's a video like this where it's more like based on Marvel Rivals instead of about Marvel Rivals, I could easily make these every day. Anyways, I'm finna stream today, maybe, hopefully, possibly. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed this. Peace.